Heads up, investors. The next financial collapse could be just around the corner. Two more bubbles are set to burst that could send shockwaves through the economy. This, according to our next guest, with a solid track record on predicting the market, Bob Wiedemer, Managing Director for Absolute Investment Management and best-selling author of The Aftershock Investor, a crash course in staying afloat in a sinking economy. All right, Bob, tell me what those bubbles are.
Well, the bubbles are the government debt bubble and the dollar bubble. Essentially, the government debt bubble is the massive increase in borrowing that we've seen in the last few years. As you said earlier, over $1 trillion a year. And the dollar bubble, which is the massive increase in money printing. We've increased our money supply almost 300%. And those bubbles are certainly helping pump up the economy, but they are bubbles. They will pop.
And what happens when they pop?
Well, all the other bubbles come down. If you look back to our financial crisis, that's really when we started pumping these things up big time. That's when we started printing a lot of money, borrowing massively more. And they did help keep the stock market up, help keep real estate, consumer spending, private credit all up. But when they pop, all those bubbles come down.
Well, tell me what the dominoes are. So we have all that debt out there, the Fed's all kinds of liquidity in the economy now. Bonds are expensive. The yields are low. And at some point, somebody's going to decide, you know what, I'm going to sell these bonds because I can do better somewhere else. Then what happens?
Well, at first, what's interesting is the Fed it's a manipulated market, essentially. I mean, the Fed is manipulating the bond market very dramatically, so it's going to try to buy those bonds. But there's going to come a point where that itself starts to scare people as more and more people get worried about the amount of money the Fed's printing. You're already seeing a lot more concern about it. And ultimately, you do get inflation. And combination of that means that ultimately you start to scare off investors hugely. But first, the Fed gives you a little bit of leeway. But ultimately, it's like any manipulated market. It goes up, kind of like a market cliff, and then it falls rather unexpectedly and quite dramatically.
You would think that we would learn from the dot-com crash. How many times have we been through this? A housing bubble, the housing crash, but it happens again and again and again. Is this the fault of the Fed? Is this something specific to the American economy? Why do we keep having these bubbles?
Well, we like to believe they're real, right? Anytime you're making a lot of money, you sure like to believe it's for real, whether it's housing or internet. You may think it's a little bit over the top, but you hope that most of it's for real. The same thing with printing money and borrowing money. We kind of all hope that the government can keep doing this forever, but we all really know it probably can't. I mean, if it could, hey, the government could just simply spend all at once and not tax and borrow the money, and then the Fed would just buy all those bonds and we'd be fine, right? Won't work that way. But we'd like to think that somehow some magic's going to come and make it all work out in the end.
Now, you predicted that the housing market would crash, and it's hard to remember now. Now we know, but way back when, people thought the housing market couldn't crash. What was the one signal? Maybe we can think about this kind of thing all over again. What was the one signal you saw that made you think we were headed for trouble?
Well, unfortunately, it's not one signal. It'd be great if it was, but it's sometimes a little hard to tell. Just like the dot-com crashed in March of 2000. What was the one signal there? Even today, it's hard to say. So that's why you kind of have to be careful in advance. You can't time this perfectly. I wish, as I said, they don't ring a bell when the market hits the top. Well, they don't ring a bell when these bubbles pop either. So you have to be kind of careful going into it.
All right. Well, we'll be careful going into it. We'll be watching you to find out when this bubble's popping. Robert, thanks for coming on. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Jerry.